We got him back. Special guest Chris Murphy back in the Ballot Battleground Nevada studio. It's been, 3 months now, Chris?
It's been 3 months. I haven't had a drink in 3 months, so that's what we're doing. We're counting down. My mom's 80th birthday was April 24th, and I was down in Southern California having golf and bourbon and wine and beer. And then I said, I'm going to take a little break. Well, it's turned into that. Now, I don't know if you scared me out of drinking after the last
after
podcast,
this episode.
Because was it May 1?
It was right around start of May. So, 3 months since we did the last mailbag. We wanted to do another one.
Think about how much has happened since then.
I know. There's that phrase, right, where it's that weeks will happen over the course of years, and then all of a sudden years of history will happen in a week, and that's what we had in the last couple weeks.
Last I checked, your son Sage was almost 2, and he's like 46 now.
Pretty much, yeah. No, he's thinking about retirement, and so much has happened since then, so I'm so glad we were able to get you back and get to more of our listener questions, because we got a bunch of them.
I mean, so much has happened since then. I mean, we had the assassination attempt on Donald Trump.
Right.
The RNC happened, and then in that time, he named his vice presidential running mate, J.D. Vance, who's going to visit Nevada this week, Reno.
And it feels like ancient history, but I believe he was also convicted since then. Convicted of, 34 felony counts in New York and Manhattan?
That happened too.
I mean, so it's just been...
And Joe Biden dropped out of the race.
Right.
This is just unbelievable.
There's a new Democratic presumptive nominee. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Okay, so staying with the Republican ticket, the GOP ticket, there's a question. We'll get to the mailbag right here from Chocolate, and I won't give you the whole username here.
Thank you. Yeah.
On Reddit. Saying, you're going to cover Project 2025, ain't seen nothing local about it. This is a national sort of platform. Donald Trump, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, has said, look, I'm not associated with 2025. It's this uber right-wing platform that's being promoted from some folks that are political. I'm not even say they're part of the Republican Party. And then J.D. Vance has been sort of alluding to the fact that he maybe aligns with it in some ways?
Sure, yeah. So for listeners who might not know, and we also got this question from someone whose handle on Reddit is Emotional Rise 53 2022. So thanks to both of those users and so many others that gave us some great questions to talk about on this week's episode. If you haven't heard, Project 2025, it's kind of the policy playbook, so to speak, for the next Republican administration. I believe it's almost 1,000 pages long. And the idea is that you take this playbook and it's kind of like a plug and play on day one for the next Republican administration for all the things that the Heritage Foundation, which is the writers and authors of this right-wing group, that they would want to see in the next Republican administration. As you mentioned, President Trump has tried to distance himself from it. He says, I don't really know much about it. I don't know anything about it. I like some of the things. I don't like others, part of Project 2025. But it is written by many of his former advisors. I believe a couple dozen of them are involved in the Heritage Foundation and writing Project 2025. And then, of course, J.D. Vance wrote the foreword to a new book that was written by the architect of Project 2025. So there are still some connections there, even if they're trying to distance themselves, seeing as how it might be unpopular.
Yeah, parallels at the least. And we'll see if J.D. Vance addresses that at all if it comes up in his address in Reno.
I wanted to tick through, though, because they said, how will it impact Nevada? Tick through just a couple of things.
Go ahead.
Again, it's almost 1,000 pages. It calls for things like eliminating the Department of Education, making it illegal to mail abortion pills over state lines, and cracking down on diversity-boosting initiatives in workplaces, as well as abolishing climate protections, changing how the FBI operates, a number of different things. If you actually search for the word Nevada, it's only mentioned in there once, but it has to deal with Yucca Mountain. So it says that they want to restore the nuclear infrastructure and restore readiness to test nuclear weapons at the Nevada National Security Site. And of course, that particular to Nevada would be incredibly unpopular. As we talked about, I believe in the last mailbag, politicians all over the course of Nevada's recent political history in the last couple of decades, pretty much all opposed to Yucca Mountain.
Oh, yeah. It goes way back to Harry Reid and Richard Bryan and before them. Be interesting. I'm sure that Catherine Cortez Masto and Jackie Rosen would oppose that idea. Interesting to see maybe where Sam Brown weighs in on that. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. If we get the chance to talk to him, we will mention that. And then one other thing, too, that I'll hit, too, and this has been talked about a lot, is removing LGBTQ plus protections. So that's been a big one that people have focused on. Eliminating the Gender Policy Council, which is a department created under the Biden administration, removing terms from federal government language like sexual orientation, gender identity. So a lot of people have honed in on that as well. Again, it's almost 1,000 pages, impossible to get into all of the things that they want to do in Project 2025. We will put a link down in the show notes for people who might be interested in learning more.
Okay, we have a user on X, Kenzie, asking, assuming he does indeed file to run, how does RFK Jr. entering the race splinter the respective two parties in Nevada?
Yeah, and we just learned as of Friday, broke the news on X, that RFK did gather enough signatures to qualify for the Nevada ballot. He has to officially file by August 9th, I believe. Assuming he does do that, he will be on the Nevada ballot after getting enough signatures. The short answer to this question is we don't really know yet, at least based on the polling. I looked at the 538 average this morning, Chris, and this is how fast things have been moving. They still have the Trump-Biden polling average up on 538.com. RFK was polling at around 8% in Nevada as of, as of July 21st, when they ended that dashboard, when Biden, dropped out of the race. There's only been one poll done, so take this with a grain of salt. And John Ralston says Nevada polling is difficult and hard to parse through as it is. But the one poll that I've seen that has Harris, Trump, and RFK Jr. has Harris down to Trump, 43 to 45, so by 2 points, and with RFK Jr. getting 5% of the vote, Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, getting 1% of the vote. So 5%, that in a race that is split by 2 points that Trump is up on Harris by in our state right now, that's huge. I don't know how that breaks, because you could make the case that RFK Jr. could pull votes from either major candidate.
That was my question. I mean, he comes from the Kennedy family, notoriously Democratic, but his platform is different. It appeals to both sides. At least parts of his platform appeal to both Republicans and Democrats. This is going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I honestly don't know the full answer to this question yet, but I'll tease ahead, because we're going to do an episode hopefully later this summer on third-party candidates, the history of how they have affected Nevada presidential races. There's a UNLV professor that's an expert in this. I hope to have him on here in the next month or so to chat about this. But yeah, I mean, you could see RFK Jr.'s anti-vax platforms pulling away some Republican voters from Donald Trump. You could see the connection to the Kennedy family and the long history of Democratic politicians from that family pulling away some Democrats. Short answer, again, we don't really know yet.
Yeah, I mean, Perot affected the 92 race with Clinton and the first Bush. And then in 2000, Ralph Nader siphoned off some votes, they think, from Al Gore, and that contested 2000 race that went to the U.S. Supreme Court.
And Jill Stein famously, in 2016, it was believed, pulled some votes away from Hillary Clinton, and perhaps that's why she lost some of these swing states by such narrow margins.
And Stein's still in it. Interesting. Yep. What's the most under-the-radar, undercovered, but still important story or issue in Nevada politics this election cycle? This comes from Tetris 410.
Yeah, I love this question because we don't always have time to focus on issues like this. And the one that I'm going to select here is the Federal Lands Bill. It's technically called the Truckee Meadows Public Lands Management Act. It's sponsored by Senator Jackie Rosen. There's a version in the House as well, I believe, sponsored by Republican Mark Amodei. And essentially, it would clear up about 15,000 acres of federal land in Washoe County for a possible sale and open up new areas, most of it east of Sparks, for development. The Sparks mayor has talked about, moving a lot of the industry away from the Truckee River and potentially out to these areas east of Sparks for more warehouses and industry out there, as well as housing. And it doesn't seem like a lot of people are talking about this, but it could potentially reshape how our entire region looks, because as of right now, 83% of the land in Washoe County, Chris, is owned by the federal government. So it's essentially, people describe us as being, quote unquote, landlocked, surrounded by, it might as well be water. It's federal land that you can't use, you can't sell or develop on. There was a hearing in a Senate committee on that Truckee Meadows Public Lands Management Act, and the next step would be that going to the full Senate, not scheduled for a vote just yet. Potentially it's a chip to be traded in the budget talks, later this year or early next year. The next session, obviously, congressional members, including Jackie Rosen, are very busy with trying to win elections this year. So I don't know if that makes it into a budget or gets passed separately. We don't know yet, but we'll continue to follow it.
So we have a question on ballot measures, and this comes from Mopu Weben. And Mopu asks, what is the life of a ballot measure like? How many votes does it need to get onto the ballot? If it passes the first round of elections, what's next? If it passes the second round of elections, what's next? Where does the ballot measure go? When it's been accepted by the people of Nevada, what happens when it fails?
This is a great question because there are a number of ballot measures that could really affect us here in Nevada that will or might be on the ballot this year. So they kind of get broken down into three categories. I don't want to go too deep in the weeds here. There's, constitutional initiatives. Those change the Constitution. A statutory initiative, which would be to create a new law. And then a referendum, which would seek to approve or disapprove of an existing law. And a great example for that one is the abortion referendum that passed in, I believe, 1990 that makes it legal to have an abortion up to 24 weeks in Nevada. Were you covering Nevada politics back in 1990, Chris? I'm trying to think.
No, it was before I was still in college at UC San Diego.
Okay.
Yeah. That was the year that I realized that I couldn't hit a curveball and that I'd never get drafted and play center field for the Dodgers. I was like, now what?
Yeah.
That was
Maybe
that was
why.
a tough year. Thanks for those memories.
Does your golf swing still...
I wasn't golfing then because I thought it hurt my baseball swing. I wish I know, but started
is
earlier.
that why? Maybe your golf swing needs some help because it resembles too much of your baseball. It's probably a different.
That's what I'm trying to purge.
Yeah.
Okay.
But as it pertains to this, all these three measures, trying to get on the ballot, they all need 102,000 valid signatures across Nevada's 4 congressional districts. The deadline to turn those in actually has passed. That was back on June 26th. The counties have to verify all those signatures. And if you have 102,000 split evenly among all the congressional districts, you make it on the ballot. If you're a constitutional amendment, for example, voter ID, that is going to be on the November ballot, you have to pass twice to amend the Constitution, 2024, and in this case, 2026. If it's just a statutory initiative changing or creating a law, it would only have to pass once.
Got it.
A little in the weeds there, but hopefully that's a good answer to Mopu Wee's question.
A trip down memory lane for me. Thanks. Hey, the cover the details. This comes from Ledick. It says, cover the details of the Nevada fake alternative electors, why the case was dismissed, if there will be any consequences for such blatant disregard for legal process, and if there are any new laws that address election misinformation. Interesting. I think we saw this really come up in 2016 for the first time. Here we are 8 years later.
Yeah, and then certainly in 2020, which is when this scheme happened, there were 6 Republicans, I believe, on the steps of the legislative building in Carson City signing and submitting this kind of bogus certificate saying that they were the true electors and they were casting their ballots for Donald Trump in the 2020 election on behalf of Nevada. And, of course, Trump won Nevada by 30,000 plus votes. And so the Attorney General, Aaron Ford, has charged these fake electors. He charged them initially down in Clark County. Their attorneys argued that it should have been brought in Carson City, which is where the act of signing these papers occurred. And a Clark County judge agreed with that. Just last week, the judge submitted her order saying this should be in a different venue. The Attorney General, Aaron Ford, is appealing this case to the state Supreme Court. So another delay in this case. Criminal cases have been brought in a handful of these states that had a scheme like this: Michigan, Georgia, Arizona, according to the Associated Press. And another delay in the Nevada case as it gets appealed up to the state Supreme Court, but Attorney General Ford says he still intends to bring this case against the so-called fake electors.
Yeah, and it's certainly on his radar as other attorneys general around the country. So hopefully they can, head that off of the past this go-round.
Yeah, and then in terms of laws for election misinformation, since that was in the question, not that I've seen, not that I've heard of. No, of course, the Nevada legislature is not until 2025. Nothing along those lines that I've seen.
This is from Clean Up Your Mess.
The Reddit names are great. You always get some good usernames.
Some are a little distasteful, but some are hilarious. This question from Clean Up Your Mess is, I'm a new Nevada voter. When I moved to Reno, I was stunned to discover that there's no Democratic candidate for the NV2 congressional district. I get that the incumbent is very established, but no Democratic opposition. How did that happen?
That is a good question, and it's one that I'm still kind of reporting currently behind the scenes to try and understand. So Mark Amadei, the Republican, longtime incumbent, he's in the race, of course. Listeners have probably seen ads for Greg Kidd. He's a nonpartisan candidate who's formerly a Republican, changed to become a nonpartisan, is running on kind of a pro-choice agenda here. And there's no Democrat in the race. I haven't seen this in my time being here. It seems like the Democrats always try and find a candidate to run in this deep red district, a sacrificial lamb, if you will, because they know that Mark Amadei has always won that seat. I don't know how it happened. Again, typically the Democrats will try and find someone. Patricia Ackerman, I believe it was, in the last cycle, and others. And this time, perhaps it was a orchestrated move behind the scenes to where if you're going to try and beat Mark Amadei, maybe we've seen that a Democrat cannot, maybe a nonpartisan can, and the Democrats said we're not going to run someone to try and help him as he tries to pull, some Republican voters and some Democratic and nonpartisan voters, or perhaps no one just wanted to run in that district knowing how difficult it is to win as a Democrat. We don't know.
Yeah, interesting. And Kidd certainly is blanketing the airwaves. You see his signs around town. And it looks like he's self-funded, as you mentioned, a Silicon Valley guy.
Yeah, he has a ton of money. Silicon Valley investor, moved here from California, I believe, within the last 4 or 5 years.
And he likes to ride his bike. He's a mountain biker.
Absolutely,
so
mountain biker,
This question, Ben, comes from Ad Upstairs 7106. And this person writes, I would have to see the ballot initiative, but one of my key questions is, what happens if someone loses their driver's license a week before the election? There's no mathematical way that they're getting the DMV and getting their new photo ID in the mail in time.
What do you mean? It's so fast to get anything done at the DMV, right?
That's a separate podcast.
You can go in and get your new ID in 5 minutes. No, so this has to do with the voter ID ballot question that we talked about on a recent episode, which got a ton of response on social media. And that was one of the concerns raised by the advocate, Carrie Dermick from All Voting is Local, that I had on. And she said, yeah, what do you do? Say you lose your ID. It's 3 days before the election. It's the weekend. Election is on Tuesday. You're not going to get a new ID by Tuesday. It's not outlined in the actual ballot initiative. But what would likely happen is if this were to pass in 2024 and 2026, the Nevada legislature meets in 2027, and they would actually write and approve all of the, for lack of a better word, other surrounding laws that would kind of stipulate what happens in different circumstances like that. So it's not in the ballot initiative. It's certainly a concern that was raised. And we will put the link to that voter ID episode in the show notes as well, because that was a question that advocates had and has yet to be answered.
Interesting. Okay, so Charlie Ford, Ben, writes, what does the local news do, or I should say, why doesn't the local news do a deeper dive on Robert Beatles? Why is he here? Why won't he leave? Give us the background on Robert Beatles.
Yeah, so Robert Beatles is a right-wing donor and activist who moved here from California in the late 2010s, I believe, 2018, 2019. Don't quote me exactly on that. And has spent a lot of his time, money, and effort trying to oust certain politicians from office, to install people that support him and his causes on the school board, the county commission, to recall certain officers. And most recently, what this person in the comment below is referencing is the recounts that he swooped in at the last minute and paid for 3 recounts for Paul White, for Mark Lawson, and Lily Barron. Lily Barron drops out. Anyways, he's paid $150,000 for these recounts that ultimately only shifted 1 vote, and that kind of leads into the comment in the question below,
From
Chris.
Baxter 7777 saying, I was asking the same question as well. As I understand it, Nevada law sets a monetary limit on how much one person can donate to a political campaign. I believe PACs have the same limit, something like $5,000. Is there a law enforcement agency that actually enforces these laws?
So, as I said, he funded these recounts. He put them through his PAC, which is called the Franklin Project. And he claims that since he funneled the money through his PAC instead of paying for them individually, that it's not subject to campaign finance laws. Former Reno Councilman Paul McKenzie filed a campaign finance violation over this, saying it is still a violation. Nevada law says that if you're using a PAC to kind of skirt existing campaign finance laws, that it is still a violation. Of course, that'll be up to the Nevada Secretary of State, which is investigating this as we speak, and whether or not they send this along to a district attorney or the Attorney General's office for possible prosecution remains to be seen. This could take weeks or months to get an answer on this.
And in the meantime, Robert Beatles has big bucks, and he's trying to have a big impact on Nevada politics.
Absolutely.
Big question here. We won't use this Reddit user's name, but the
You
question
can go on Reddit and
nonetheless-
see their name if you like.
the
But
question nonetheless, Ben, is why doesn't the city of Reno have any short-term rental laws? That is a big issue.
absolutely, as we've seen so many communities crack down on Airbnbs, VRBOs, limiting how many there can or can't be. And Reno doesn't have any sort of crackdown, but it's coming potentially soon. So there is a presentation that's going to be given to the Reno City Council Wednesday, the day you're listening to this episode. As of now, staff are not recommending any changes to create a short-term rental ordinance, but it could be discussed during Wednesday's Reno City Council meeting.
Let's stay with Reno here and talk about the mayor. There's a question from Bones916 saying, who are the serious contenders to replace Hillary Shivi when she's termed out?
Yeah, she's been the mayor of Reno since 2014. She's termed out after her current term, which ends in 2026. So I kind of have 4 names for you, Chris. Possible serious contenders to replace Shivi. Number 1, Kate Marshall, the former Nevada lieutenant governor, a Democrat. She had $116,000 on hand earlier this year, and she actually switched her campaign finance form to say that she does intend to run for Reno mayor in 2026. That's number 1. Devin Reese, he is the at-large city council member currently. He's running for the Ward 5 seat right now. A number of council members have been appointed to their positions more recently or won their election more recently, but he's been on the council for a little bit longer. He has the most experience on the council right now, and it seems like he does have higher aspirations. He, of course, would need to win his seat. He is trying to win his current seat, or Ward 5 seat, in 2024, potentially looking for something bigger in 2026. His name gets thrown around a lot, as does Eddie Lorton, who lost a couple of elections, several now, I believe, 2022, 2020, 2018, and 2014. He has not won, but he has kept on trying for mayor, for at-large city council seat. I wouldn't be surprised if he were to run again, and then Pat Cashell, the son of the former mayor Bob Cashell, the late great Bob Cashell. His son is the CEO of Sky Tavern. He was involved with the Volunteers of America. His name gets thrown around a lot too. Perhaps he jumps in that race in 2026.
Yeah, Pat Cashell certainly has name recognition in these parts. Back to Hillary Shivi. Another question, Ben. Friedel asked this question of Shivi. He says, is Hillary Shivi in violation of the state constitution come January when she's been on the Reno City Council for more than 12 years?
Yeah, the term limit is 12 years here in Nevada.
But she would be there longer than 12 years if reelected, right?
She would be. So, yeah, she was last elected in 2022 through a term that goes through 2026. In 2026, she will have served 14 years. So a lot of people think that that exceeds the term limit. She might be in violation when she hits that 12-year mark. But there's an old Secretary of State's interpretation from around 2015 that says if you've served 10 years and you're running for election, you can win another term, even if it takes you beyond the 12-year mark. In this case, it takes her to 14 years. But since she won her last term at the 10-year mark, she's allowed to serve one more term.
So the interpretation would be, if you expound upon that, which would be, if you're at 12 years, you're done.
Right.
But if you're within that 12-year window, you can still run and then serve another 4, which puts you at 14.
Correct.
Okay. As long as you're within that 12-year window.
That could be challenged.
Yeah.
It hasn't been challenged in the courts, to my knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
It could be. It has not been. And so we're going to go off of that old Secretary of State's interpretation that says she can go up to that 14-year mark since she won her last term at the 10-year mark.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, you cleared it up for us. I think that's really interesting. You want to do some fun questions?
Let's do. A lot of these are serious.
There's so much
yeah,
serious
let's do
stuff,
it.
and it gets into the weeds.
For sure.
If you're listening to Ballot Battleground Nevada, you really are into our local politics, which is
sure.
awesome. I love that you
Yeah.
have this venue. But I also love that you like to get out and have fun. You're not just a dad
Right, yeah.
of little Sage. Sage is how old now?
He is 2 and some change now.
Yes.
So, and he is all of it. I'm
Yeah.
not going to say terrible twos because I don't like that nomer. Or that's kind of a misnomer.
No, he's the
some of the
cutest kid.
moments can be terrible,
you
but
are
some of the moments are even more wonderful.
You are the best dad in the world,
Oh,
too.
thank
It's
you, Chris.
awesome. Following you on social media is great, just for little Sage. Okay, everyone knows that you have like some of the best hair in TV. I mean, all the dudes are envious. and so this question comes in from illustrious Dare 4379. What kind of gel do you use in your hair? It never moves, even when windy.
Yeah.
What is your go-to gel, Ben Marjat?
Well, it's because I have Lego hair, so it doesn't move.
Lego Batman. And I never miss leg day.
And they put, you can't see it because it's an audio platform, but a great GIF of someone slicking back their hair from some movie. I don't know. Since they asked, I will answer. I'll give the people what they want, Chris,
Please,
which
Ben.
is it's Old Spice pomade. And last week
Old Spice.
I ran out of that Old Spice pomade. I had to switch to a backup gel deep in my backpack. It was so sticky and greasy and nasty, so that's why I stick with the Old Spice.
The Old Spice.
What do you use
I used to love
to
those
keep-
Old Spice commercials too back in the day. The guy with the sweater
Oh,
walking around.
yeah.
Do you know who used to do the Old Spice commercials? Was the actor who just passed away from Friends. His name's escaped me all of a sudden. It's his father was an actor in the Old Spice commercials.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll link to that in the show notes, too.
There you go. I go
Yours
with
is-
American Crew. Yeah.
Okay,
I
good
try to
stuff.
find it on sale at TJ Maxx.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
And-
I never pay full price for anything. I shop at a grocery outlet and then TJ Maxx. That's me.
Good for you. And you're doing your hair gel at what, like 3:45 in the morning every
Yeah,
morning, probably
it's
4
crazy.
a.m. That's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Here's a more important question, though. This
Yeah.
comes from Ecstatic Jackfruit 35, another great username. What's your favorite sandwich place in town? That's big.
That's
Here's
an
my thing.
important-
You
yeah.
talk about our hours.
Uh-huh.
When we're done with the morning show and our
Yeah.
meeting at
Yeah.
9:30, I don't want breakfast. I've had that all morning.
Sure.
I want like a sandwich or a meatball sub or
Yeah.
something. But it's hard to find that outside of Mexican food at that
At
hour.
9, 10 in the
So
morning.
what's your go-to
Yeah.
sandwich spot?
We were chatting about this before we recorded, and gosh, I'm feeling hungry now just talking about this question. It's got to be Full Belly Deli. Maybe that's
yeah.
cliche because it is so popular, but I believe they have a Cuban that's amazing. Honestly, anything. You could pick anything from the menu of Full Belly Deli, and it's going to be good. And it's like, what, a mile from our station
And
here
what's
on
is that the
Vassar
Nar
Street?
burrito
Oh, the
thing?
Nar burrito. Have you had that one?
I've had it more than I should. It's so good.
Hey, Chris.
When are we doing mailbag again? This
has
was
been,
fun.
I know. We should make this a more
Yeah.
common, regular occurrence.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a blast going through all of your guys' questions. Keep sending them in just at any time. We'd like to answer them throughout, even if we're not doing a full mailbag episode. Send in your questions. We love hearing from our listeners. This has been so much fun.
And we
Chris.
love seeing your usernames. I mean, we might not be able to repeat them on
You
a
guys-
podcast or on the news, but we just love reading them.
If you really want to read them, go on Reddit. You'll have a good time. Thanks for listening. Chris, thanks for coming in and shortening your golf game from 18 to just 9 holes today, just for us.
Thanks for having me.